My name's Layne Miles. I'm from Southeast Arkansas, McGee. Topic here today: early planting brings better harvest. Now, like this is on our farm. You know, what works for us may not work for everybody else. A little bit about myself and my operation. Like I said, my name's Layne Miles. I'm here with my wife Ryan and my son Luke. Not here today is my mom and my dad, Matt and Sherry K. Miles. Graduated from the University of Arkansas at Monticello with a Bachelor's of Science in Plant and Soil Science. Currently farming 10,000 acres with a pretty good mixture of cotton, corn, and soybeans. And then we have about 1,000 acres of continuous rice. Also, we run, let's skip one. So we started farming in 2012 with my dad and started with 50 acres. About 2010, I really wasn't much into farming at all. Didn't want anything to do with it. It wasn't what I wanted to take up my time going through high school. And luckily, Dad kept pushing me to kind of stay out there, and it worked out good for me. In 2015, I increased to 2,500 acres and started farming full-time with Dad. Also, we're running 12 full-time trucks hauling local fertilizer and grain, and then our own grain. And what we're going to talk about today is why earlier is better. And like I said, it's better on our farm. It may not be better on your farm. We'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages and some 2-year data showing why it works. And only 2-year data because we started planting beans in March, late part of March, 2 years ago. So it's when we really started keeping up with that late March, data. Some of the advantages is you can get an earlier harvest. So having that earlier push in planting, those beans start to come off a little bit earlier, spreads that harvest out a little bit. And same thing with planting. Still you get a few more days of optimal planting, where maybe in our area March the 20th to April the 20th may be a optimal planting instead of April the 5th to April the 20th. You get a few more days. And then a pricing opportunity you get with those earlier beans, with the beans that we have that come off in March, we'd like to have off in the last part of August. Sometimes the supply and demand is short on around that time because elevators are trying to get rid of some beans and don't have as many to ship off, and trying to get some more, and those early beans, you're generally the first person to get them in. And then also insect pressure. The earlier you plant them, the less pressure you have. The less insect pressure we're getting. And then cooler temps at flowering, keeping that bean as less stressed as possible. If you don't have those hot temps when it's trying to flower and put pods on, it'll stick more flowers and more pods. And then plant height. And this was kind of a planting. Sometimes we get them up in the chest area and you get a lot more lodging, or we do. If we can keep it at that belly button height, that plant will stay standing. And then my little warning before we get to some of the disadvantages. Starting with the disadvantages is day length. And the earlier you plant, if you get into that March, and I use March because that's our early. That may be your normal here, or that may be too early, the further north you go. But in that late March area that we plant, we don't quite catch the full optimal day length of that summer solstice that that we can catch if we plant, the April the 5th to 10th, something like that. The next one being a frost. These beans up here that I have a picture of, actually, they either went through, in that picture, they went through their first frost or their second frost, which can be, detrimental at times. That bean was real small at the time, so I think it, with them cotyledons, in that cotyledon stage, it took those frosts a little bit better. But a frost can be detrimental. And then soil temps kind of go along with that. When you're planting at those times, the soil can be a little bit cold. We like to have that probably around that 55-degree soil temp when we start. And like I said, plant height is also on my disadvantage stage or disadvantage page. The earlier you plant, that plant could stress a little bit more, so it could get a little too short, and we don't really want it too short. And the last one, and the most important one for us, is mental stress. And with those earlier beans, especially with the frost and the cold temperatures that you could get at that time, mental stress is big. I mean, we were driving turn rows, running strings, counting stands, probably for 20 days straight, and things may not change day to day, but you may go out there one day and there'll be another plant up and you're excited. So here's a chart kind of on some of the data that I had, and what I did is on the left hand side you can see where it's bushels gained. Well, bushels gained from what? That I had a hard time coming up with where did you get those bushel gains. So I used late April and early May as my check, and I don't like to use the word check because check sounds like a plots and different stuff. And I know we've got to have plot research, but these are each. I got data from each part of those months, and it's 500-acre data. So it's not necessarily plots, and I didn't have a check, but I had to have something to have a check off of. But basically what you can see is the trend line when you start, like I said, when we start in our late March, you can see the trend line. The later you get, the more them bushels gained fall. And that's some of the data showing what my chart before was showing. Like I said, I had the check on the April and May. And in 2017, our March was not necessarily better than our April, about a bushel. Could have been anything. But yet we still caught some of those advantages on, pricing opportunities and whatnot in that March. But the bushels gained did not necessarily change. In 2018, it did. We gained about 8 bushels in our March over our early April. And then you can see what we gained over the late April, early May. And then just kind of a review over, what I said is planting early can be risky, but it can be rewarding. You get that early market advantage at times, and it may or may not be there, but hopefully it is. Earlier harvest, which brings them beans off a little bit faster, and cooler growing temps and limited pest pressure. And then the early April and planting, generally a little bit safer route that still yields with the earlier March, but you can still catch some of the cooler temps, but you lose that early market advantage. And then the late April into May still gets back risky. You get more pests and damage and diseases, some late rains, which we've all got this year. And that's about all I have. If anybody has any questions.
So where were you located again?
Southeast Arkansas.
Southeast?
Around McGee.
Okay.
Do you think some of that gain that you got came from the damage and rains we had in August that damaged your April planted beans?
I don't. We did not get necessarily the damage that a lot of people got. Don't get me wrong, we did have some. we were cutting the farm that we planted in that late March. We were cutting, we were cutting some really, really good beans, and cut that 500 acres. Went to the next one, and it drops 8 bushels, and it was consistent 8 bushels. We cut that whole farm. Went to the next one, which was maybe planted April the 15th, the 12th, 20th, somewhere around in there. Another 8 bushels. You get into any that we had at that early May stage, another 8 bushels. I mean, it was just, it was constant on planting dates on how our yield was falling off.
What about your varieties on those? Are you changing that on your plant date? Or?
Pretty much all the same ones. 47 T59s, 46 T36s. The early May was 47 T36. Pretty much all the same varieties across most of those. Now some of those did change, but they were all high yielder varieties.
What kind of plant stands did you have during this time frame that you were talking about?
On the earlier,
Yes, sir.
round 100 probably. We probably kept some that was 80. Now we don't necessarily like having that low. To me, optimum is that 120, 125. But we kept them, and they did pretty good.
What did you actually plant?
About 160,
Okay.
165 maybe.
Did you adjust that on plant date, your seeding rate?
We had a little bit more in March. We probably went down to the 150, 140, but we knew we were going to get a little better stand too.
Did you have seed treatments on your seed I sent you did on this?
Yes, sir.